Hare Krishna. So, we are discussing the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, chapter entitled Karma Yoga. So, last week, uh, if you remember, the topic is going on that uh, even if one is self-realized, still one should engage into performing his duties. Why? In order to set example for others. So, for that, Krishna says even he himself engages in the work. Why? Because if Krishna failed to engage in performing duties, then there will be lot of problem. The world will be put to ruination. So that's why there is Krishna is 25th verse. He spoke about act without attachment to set example. Also, Krishna tells that don't disturb the ignorant by giving them forcefully telling them to the path of renunciation, because it causes trouble for both himself and society. Why? Because the ignorant person thinks himself as the doer. So, but the person who is in knowledge, he understands that he is different from his senses and body. So, better in order to set an example for these ignorant people, set a work, perform your prescribed duties. But Krishna says that work for himself means work for Krishna, and in this way follow him. In this way, although one may be acting in material platform, but one will not be bound. And then 31st verse Krishna spoke that if one follows Krishna's teachings, then they get free from material bondage. If one disregards Krishna's teachings out of envy, then they are ruined. Then 33rd verse Krishna spoke that one should work according to one's nature, because there are deep-rooted conditioned nature. So, in general, a person also acts according to his nature, isn't it? One's nature, pushes him, from within. So, the nature is deep-rooted. And 34th verse, so that's why there is a gradual purification required to uh, come out of this attachment and aversion. So, so that's why these principles of prescribed duties are given in the scriptures. So if one performs them in Krishna consciousness, then the gradual purification takes place, and in this way one does not come under the control of attachment and aversion. Now Arjun may ask, what if one adopts to others' duties such as non-violence rather than doing one's own duty of fighting the battle due to attachment and repulsion? Is there any problem? You see that still in Arjun's mind, this thought is still going on. What is that? सब छोड़ के चलो जंगल में चलो पूरा युद्ध छोड़ के जंगल में चलो, ये थॉट अभी भी चल रहा है. So it's Arjun is saying, is there any problem if I do somebody else's duty? Is there any problem if I you know if I okay, you are telling that I should do my duty, I should do my prescribed duty. Is there any problem if I not do my prescribed duty and do somebody else's duty? वो भी तो duty है ना. So for that, Krishna is going to speak the next verse, 35th verse. Okay, so please recite 35th verse.
Aradhan Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu, just a minute. श्रेयान् स्वधर्मो विगुणः
श्रेयान् स्वधर्मो विगुणः
परधर्मात् स्वनुष्ठितः
परधर्मात् स्वनुष्ठितात्
स्वधर्मे निधनं श्रेयः
स्वधर्मे निधनं श्रेयः
परधर्मो भयावहः.
परधर्मो भयावहः.
Translation: It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than others' duties perfectly. Distraction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duty, for to follow another's path is dangerous.
He says better fight and get defeated, than trying to become a Brahmana artificially. That's what Krishna is telling Arjun. you know so better to perform one's own duty faultily, than to imitate others' duties. He says destruction in the course of performing one's duty is better than engaging other duties. Even if you fight and get killed, that is much better than running away from battle and trying to imitate a Brahmana. Hmm. To follow others' path is dangerous. So paradharmo bhayavaha. It is very, very dangerous to follow others' dharma. So in this way, Krishna is telling, do your duty, don't imitate others. So now in the purport, Prabhupada says there are two types of duties. So we all are aware of it. There is a conditional duty and there is a constitutional duty. So there is a material duty which is based on our psychophysical condition. So they are given in the scripture. So basically this Varnashrama, especially Varnas, are based on one psychophysical nature. Particular type of Varna is assigned. And that's how based on that Varna, a particular type of duties are assigned also. Okay, this to be done, this to be done by this particular person. There are spiritual duties which are our constitutional duties. So that is duty to serve Krishna, duty to engage in devotional service. So Prabhupada says that um, whether material or spiritual, one should stick to one's prescribed duty even up to death, rather than imitating others' duties. So till the time one is in particular Varna and Ashrama situation, one should, even up to that point of death, one should stick to one's own duties and don't try to do duties of others. So these duties may be different, but the most important principle is following the authorized direction. Don't act whimsically, follow authorized direction. That's what Prabhupada is saying. For example, if a brahmachari says that I want to preach to Matajis, that is not his duty. Right? So once one devotee approached Radhesham Prabhu, Prabhuji, I want your blessings. I'm starting new preaching program. He said, oh, very nice. Prabhuji said, what preaching program? He said, it is girls program. He said, there is no blessing for you. Brahmachari should not start a girls program. Prabhu, but I am teacher in that girls college. He said, that was fine, but you cannot do preaching to girls. So that is not his duty. He should get some Mataji who can preach to them, isn't it? And in this way, so if he does this others duty, this is Mataji's duty to preach to girls. If he does Mataji's duty, then paradharmo bhayavaha, there will be bhayavaha result, isn't it? So this is one example. Similarly, Arjun is trying to imitate a Brahmana's duty, but that is not recommended. So Prabhupada says further that a Brahmana is supposed to be non-violent. So Brahmana's nature is that whatever wrong is done to him, he just should tolerate. Tarorapi sahishnuna. He should not retaliate. That is Brahmana. Always forgive. In any situation, always forgive. That is Brahmana's duty. But Kshatriya's duty is not like that. A Kshatriya may, for himself, he may also take up that type of this thing, especially a devotee Kshatriya. He may, for himself, he may also tolerate any insults, any amount of injustice and all that. But Kshatriya also has a role and responsibility in terms of state which he is ruling, in terms of the particular society which he is supposed to protect. So when there is a anarchy in the state, he should not just tolerate. He should not just keep quiet. That is against the duty of a Kshatriya. So he has to employ violence that time if there is anarchy in the situation, in the state around. then he should do violence. So that's what is important. Just imagine if a Kshatriya becomes very forgiving, and says, I will be only non-violent. So then what will happen? Lot of thieves and rogues, they will become very much prominent in the society, and there will be big trouble. So more or less, sometimes in our Indian history we see that this, because of adopting parodharma, no, paradharma. Parodharma is different, right? What is that? Paradharma, not parodharma. Parodharma is transcendental this thing. Paradharma. Because of this adopting paradharma, especially by kings, there have been big trouble, and that's how a lot of invasions happens on India. They happened in the past on India. One of the main reason is because of not doing one's own duty, paradharma, trying to do others' duty. So, uh, Kshatriya, he should not just say that I am also non-violent. Hmm. The Kshatriya has to become violent at times, especially in order to protect religious principles. So, Prabhupada says, for Kshatriyas, it is better to be vanquished following the rules of violence than to imitate a Brahmana who follows the principles of non-violence. Similarly, a Brahmana should not become violent. So, the Brahmana should be non-violent. If a Brahmana becomes violent, that also doesn't feel good. Then it also creates a problem. Sometimes there has to be uh, sometimes brahmacharis, people think them to be Brahmanas. We don't know whether they are Brahmanas or not, but they are considered to be like synonymous to Brahmanas somehow. That's the public image. Sometimes suppose brahmacharis are going, and along with some other devotees are there, and then there is some kind of fight. So people expect that brahmachari should not be fighting, he should be non-violent. आप साधु है, आप शांत रहना चाहिए. He said, you know, you should not be fighting like this, people say. So that's why what they should do is that if there are other boys or other students or working devotees are there, they should deal with such matter, because in general public don't expect brahmacharis to be fighting. So, but sometimes what they are also not fully brahmanas. If it is that way be the case, so उनका भी आता है थोड़ा passion. So that happens sometimes. But the point is that if they are taking the role of a brahmana, then they should also act like a brahmana. So, in this way, these codes are given for what? For gradual purification of heart. So Prabhupada says everyone has to cleanse his heart by a gradual process, not abruptly. Not abruptly. For example, if there is a person from a Vaishya or Shudra background, he immediately says, no, I'll give up my duties and I'll simply study Vedas. So that is also not appropriate, because he cannot immediately jump to the stage of being a Brahmana. So similarly, if a person, he directly says, I am like a sannyasi only, he suddenly adopts the order of sannyas. That is also not appropriate, because he may not be able to maintain that sannyas order. So there has to be gradual purification. But however, when one transcends these three modes, then one can, this particular shloka doesn't apply. If one is transcendental to three modes, then one can take to others' duties also, especially based on time, place, and circumstances. One may have to adopt others' particular duties. So, Prabhupada says such a person who is transcendental to three modes, he can do anything and everything under the guidance of bona fide spiritual master. So, example is Vishwamitra. He was Kshatriya, but he became Brahmana eventually. Similarly, Parshuram, he was a Brahmana, but he acted like Kshatriya. So, based on time, place, circumstances, they may adopt some other's profession. It will not be Bhayavaha. So So those who are transcendental, they can do so. But as long as one is on the material platform, he must perform his duties according to the modes of material nature. Hmm. So, and Prabhupada says at the same time, he should have full sense of Krishna consciousness. So, uh, so we should be careful to do our own duty and not the duty of others. Hmm. It is like a medicine. Hmm. So we have particular disease and some other person may have another type of disease. So we have to take our medicine and not others' medicine. For example, somebody has a fever, another person has got indigestion. So person with fever, he should not take the medicine of indigestion. It may create further problem. Person with indigestion, if he takes the medicine of fever, that he may create a problem. Similarly, a spiritual master, he prescribes different duties to different persons based on their conditioned nature. Hmm. Based on their three modes. Basically, conditioned nature is the combination of basically three modes of material nature. उसके हिसाब से person का स्वभाव बनता है. When we say स्वभाव or nature, what is that? A unique combination of three modes of material nature. उससे जो व्यक्ति का स्वभाव बनता है उसके हिसाब से उनको क्या दिया जाता है, एक पर्टिकुलर ड्यूटी दिया जाता है, एंड दैट ड्यूटी पर्सन शुड परफॉर्म. So now, after hearing this verse, um, Arjun may determinedly think, yes, from today onwards, I'll steadily do my duty and control my attachments and aversions. I'll act according to only Shastras and nothing else. So, but an experienced teacher, as experienced teacher, Krishna understands that such sudden inspirations sometimes may not be long lasting. So these type of inspirations are sometimes we get, right, spurti ali. So they may get some spurti suddenly. A person get, yes, henceforth I'll chant 32 rounds every day. Henceforth I will give up sweet every day. I will not eat sweet in my life. So one may take a lot of such in this thing inspirations, but experienced teacher knows that such inspiration may sometimes prove difficult to adhere over time. Actually, Arjun could have really stuck to the vow also. Arjun was so powerful, but Arjun is asking for the people in general. Sometimes a person, when he is enlightened, he gets that type of inspiration. Henceforth, no lust business, no anger business, no greed business. I'll give all these anarthas, But over the period of time, it is difficult to stick to such inspirations. So that's why this particular sections ends over here, wherein Krishna has spoken performance of Nishkama Karma Yoga to set an example. And now there is going to be, Arjun is going to ask for people in general that, what is the obstacle in following our inspirations, or obstacle in sticking to our inspiration. We generally may take a lot of, when we hear the knowledge, then a lot of inspiration comes. But what's an obstacle by which we cannot adhere to our inspirations? So for that, Krishna is going to speak the next section. So 36th to 43rd verse, this is the last section of this chapter, conquering the lust, the greatest enemy. So please recite 36th verse, please recite.
Anupam Nityanand Prabhu.
अर्जुन उवाच अथ केन
We will repeat after you.
अथ केन प्रयुक्तोऽयम्
अथ केन प्रयुक्तोऽयम्
प्रयुक्तोऽयम्
पापं चरति पुरुषः
पापं
पापं
चरति पुरुषः
अनिच्छन्वपि वार्ष्णेय
अनिच्छन्नपि वार्ष्णेय
बलादीव नियोजितः
बलादीव नियोजितः.
Translation. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vishnu, by what is one impelled in sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force?
Yeah. So we all have this experience, right? Sometimes we don't want to do a particular, unauthorized activity, but it as if some third party is forcing us to do it, isn't it? We all have experience of this thing. हम नहीं करना चाहते, बट ऐसा लगता है कि एक माइंड नाम का व्यक्ति है जो हमको फोर्स कर रहा है ये करने के लिए, और some third party somehow it seems that is forcing us to do particular activity which we know which is not good and we don't want to do it also. But still some third party, it seems that it is like catching us by collar and making us do that as if we are like an employee, or a servant of that particular fellow. So they forcefully make us do. So what is that? That's what Arjun is asking. What is that type of force which person is impelled to act sinfully even though unwillingly? So this is the so in this way, so Arjun is asking because Krishna in the 34th verse he told that become free from raga and dvesha. So now Arjun is asking about that how still, even though a living entity may be knowledgeable, but still he has got attachment to sense objects. So raga and dvesha is not so easy to give up. You know, like like and hate, these are not so easy to give up. So although he knows that these are forbidden by the scriptures, what is that force which makes one do that, one falls to it, that raga and dvesha? So purport, Prabhupada says that a living entity as part and parcel of Supreme is originally pure, and he is free from all these attachments and aversions, and he is free from all such kind of troubles. But when he falls from so he's not subjected to the sins of material world. He is never sinful. Nobody is sinful originally. Everybody is pure devotee originally. So this is a good news for all of us. We are all originally pure devotees. So, but what happens when the living entity is in contact with material nature? Then he may act in sinful ways, and sometimes even against his will. So Prabhupada says at the same time one should know that, if you remember this verse, Prakrute kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. So Krishna previously spoke that a foolish living entity thinks himself to be doer, whereas who are doers? Three modes of material nature, and beyond that Krishna is the one who controls these three modes of material nature. So these people are doer. Now one may say, so dekho, I am not the doer. So even though I am doing sinful activities, who is doing it? Krishna only spoke. Who is doing three modes of material nature? They are getting it done from me. Krishna is getting it done from me. There was one serial killer. His name was Ramsay. He was not Indian, somewhere in Italy or somewhere. you know so he had many murders he did, and when he was convicted in the court, he said it was God who was inspiring from within. God inspired me from within to do these murders. So Prabhupada says sinful actions are not impelled by the super soul within, but due to another cause. So don't think that super soul is inspiring us to do sinful activities. So Prabhupada rules out that question itself. Super soul never impels one to do. So is that superior force super soul who is making us do things unwillingly? No, that's what Prabhupada tells. So there is one superior force which makes us act unwillingly sinful way, but that superior force is not super soul, is not Paramatma. Then who is that? That will be spoken in the next verse. So yeah, please recite 37th verse.
अर्जुन सारथी प्रभु.
श्री भगवान उवाच
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha
भगवानुवाच
कामदेश क्रोध एष
Kamesha Krodha
कामेश
Esha
क्रोध एष
रजोगुण समुद्भवा
Rajoguna samudbha
Mahashana Mahapapa
Mahashano Mahapapma
Mahapapma
Tenamiha Vairinam.
Vidyenam Nihavairinam.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "It is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world."
Yeah, very important verse. The verse to be memorized. So, who is that enemy? Krishna is identifying. Who is that superior force or enemy? So that is lust. Mr. Lust is what degrades one to leads one to degradation. So it is lust which causes material attachment. Kama esha, krodha esha. So lust and his younger brother called anger. These two brothers, these are our greatest enemies. How they are born? Rajoguna से दोनों का birth होता है. So lust is born through Rajoguna, and when it is degraded further through Tamoguna, it becomes anger. So such lust and anger, they are Mahashano. Ashana. Ashana means kind of hunger. Hungry. Mahashana means they are extremely hungry, means they are all devouring. Mahapapma. They are very, very sinful. Vidhi eham iha vairinam. So why they are sinful? Because they instigate, one to commit sins. Who? Lust and anger. So that's why they are the greatest enemies of living entity. So in this world, that's why there are no other enemies for a person. Generally, person may think, oh, he's my friend, another person is my enemy. This type of duality exists. But there is no enemy for a person bigger than these two enemies which are within ourselves only. That is lust and anger. These are the biggest enemies, in our life. So purport, Prabhupada writes that, so we understand that living entities originally has great love for Krishna. In his pure state, there is no lust, there is no contamination. So he has pure love for Krishna. But when he comes to material world, then that sense of love is transformed into lust. How? In the association of modes of material nature. So this material nature is always very alert. As soon as a living entity माया मुग्ध से जी भोगवांछा करे निकटस्थ माया तारे chapatiya dhare. As soon as the living entity wants to enjoy material energy, immediately material energy captures him. And how she captures? She captures the living entity with three modes. It's like a police capturing a conditioned soul with ropes, chains. So these three chains are these three modes. And especially out of that, this mode of passion and ignorance, these are very tight chains. So this lust, this love for the living entity, which living entity has for Krishna, that gets transformed into lust. And Prabhupada gives example of a milk when it contact with sour object like imli. Generally in the night they put imli in the milk, then it becomes curd. It becomes yogurt. So now in this way the love gets transformed into lust. This lust, when it is unsatisfied, it leads to anger. And when one comes in the mode of anger, then one becomes illusioned. And in this way, due to illusion, one continues material existence. You remember that formula? Dhyato vishayan pumsa sangasteshu pajayate संगात संजायते कामः. काम से क्या होता है? क्रोध. क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोह. सम्मोहात् स्मृति विभ्रम. स्मृति भ्रंशात् बुद्धिनाशः. बुद्धिनाशात् प्रणश्यति. So similar thing is again Prabhupada is repeating here. So when the lust is unsatisfied, it transforms into anger. Now here the word lust need not necessarily mean only sex urge or sex desire. So lust in general refers to great desire for material enjoyment. That's what is called lust. It need not be necessarily only sex urge. Sex desire is the highest form of or grossest form of lust. But lust also refers to other types of desire to enjoy in this world. Now, when that desire to enjoy is dissatisfied, it transforms into anger. And then this anger, when one becomes exceedingly angry, then one is put into illusion. And because of such illusion, what is the result? One continues on in this material existence. Prabhupada says, therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity. Because it is only because of lust, a living entity remains entangled within material world. So it may seem that even though one engages into some lustful activities, there is no such reaction. Immediate suffering may not come, but the suffering comes over the period of time. And that suffering comes in the form of bondage into material existence, bondage into this material world. So this is basically the suffering itself. There is no, it is not that there has to be some extra suffering required. The suffering comes in it in the form of material attachments and furthering of material desires. That itself leads to suffering. So Prabhupada says wrath or anger is the manifestation of mode of ignorance. So in this way, tamoguna is anger, rajoguna is lust. So if these two, tamoguna and rajoguna, they bind the conditioned soul. Prabhupada says, however, when a person comes under the sway of mode of passion, rather than degrading it to ignorance, if one elevates that mode of passion to goodness, how? By the prescribed method of living and acting. Prescribed method of living and acting is the way to transform passion to goodness, uplift the person in the mode of passion to mode of goodness, saving him from going down to the mode of ignorance. So what is that prescribed method of living and acting? Anybody knows? Okay, following varnashrama dharma. This is one way you can say. Yeah, varnashrama
Morning
dharma.
program.
Okay, morning program. Yeah, this is also prescribed way of living and acting. Any other? So one should basically get up early in the morning and chant the holy names of the Lord. That's what essentially, that's what it means. Yeah. Any other? Regulative, yukta ahara vihara, yukta cheshta. Yeah, this is also prescribed way of acting. So, yes, that is also very good answer. Yeah, prescribed way of acting and living. Any other? Also, there is Vaishnava etiquettes. So proper codes of Vaishnava behavior, especially for devotees. How do we prevent ourselves from this thing? Prevent ourselves from lust and anger by proper Vaishnava behaviors and Vaishnava etiquettes. Especially when it comes to lust, then it is very much important. This yukta ahara vihara. So mode of goodness, one can come to mode of goodness through the proper principles of this yukta ahara vihara, yukta cheshta, yukta karma, taking bath regularly, keeping surroundings clean with proper association. So all various things keep us, elevate us to mode of goodness. Morning, chanting and all that, performing spiritual activities in the morning time. So that also helps us to come to mode of goodness. And also anger should be especially prescribed way of acting and living is through proper Vaishnava etiquettes. Like even if one is feeling very angry on some devotee, one should not immediately resent to this anger. One should try to follow Vaishnava etiquettes, that by which one will be restrained. So that restrained anger eventually will be also pacified. So in this way, so Rajesh Amru says, na, if you uh, want to write some angry mail to somebody, he says you write it and put it in draft. Don't send it. Then next day you try to send. You can think next day you read it again, and before sending you read next day. You'll 50% of that you will reduce. You'll say, oh, itna jarurat nahi hai likhne ka. And I have practically experienced also. I have done it several times. ऐसा एकदम वो keyboard को you know you want to very hard press keyboard buttons also when you want to write an angry mail to somebody or message, even that comes within the keyboard also. While typing also it comes, but don't send, put it in the draft. Next day you will see, अरे इतना जरूरत नहीं है, चलो थोड़ा half cut कर देंगे हम almost. Like that. So this is one of the tips Prabhuji gave. So these are some of the ways one can control one's anger. So now the next paragraph, Prabhupada says that the Supreme Personality of Godhead expanded himself into many. Eko vaha bahushyamaha. This is a Vedic aphorism. Krishna is one. He said, I will become many. For what? Krishna has become many means Krishna also has expanded into living entities. Many also means many Vishnu Tattva expansions. Many also means many Shakti Tattva expansions. Many also means Jiva Tattva expansions. So Krishna expands himself into Jivas. So Jivas are also expansions of Krishna, but they are minute expansions. But what is the purpose that Krishna expanded himself into many? Purpose is for increasing spiritual bliss. And Prabhupada says the living entities are part and parcels of this spiritual bliss. So purpose of Krishna expanding himself into many is to increase the spiritual bliss. Like a person may be alone, he may not feel so much happy. He may be happy also, he may have a lot of good money, he may have a lot of enjoyment, but still he wants to get married. Why? Because the expansion of bliss, it expands the happiness. Now husband and wife may be staying together, but still they want to expand bliss, then they have children also. So in this way, person wants to expand bliss, then he expands into many. So same way Supreme Lord also expands into many for his enjoyment, so that he can expand the bliss. And Prabhupada says living entities are part and parcel of this bliss, spiritual bliss. Means what? If living entities, Krishna, he wants to enjoy unlimitedly. If living entities cooperate with Krishna's enjoyment by giving him service, the living entities also experience the same bliss. And in this way, the bliss keeps on expanding through various leelas, through various rasas, and through various reciprocations. So in this way, Krishna expands himself into, many for spiritual experience or spiritual bliss. So if there is a cooperation between living entity and the Supreme Lord, both become ecstatic and very happy, and the bliss expands. At the same time, the living entities are not made like a robots, artificial intelligence. They are also having their own free will. So now, if the living entity uses his free will to serve Krishna, he is very blissful, and the bliss keeps on expanding. But if he misuses his independence, then that service attitude towards Krishna is transformed into propensity for sense enjoyment. And in this way, they come under the sway of lust. So now when a living entity comes under the sway of lust, Lord creates material nature for him. Okay, you can try to, it's a facility so that you can try to fulfill your lustful propensities. Chalo, try to enjoy to best of your capacity, enjoy as much as you want. But when living entity understands, after many attempts of enjoyment, when the living entity understands that this entire attempt for enjoyment is simply baffling. I have tried to enjoy in so many ways, but it has never given me satisfaction. As Prabodhananda Saraswati, he says, or who is saying this? Kamadhinam katidhana katida palita durvishaha. He says, this verse is by Prabodhananda Saraswati.
रूप गोस्वामी,
Kulashekara.
Who? Kulashekar
रूप
Maharaj?
रूप गोस्वामी,
Rupa Goswami? No, no, you can find out through Veda base. I don't remember. This verse is very famous, but he says, Kama dinan katidhana katida palita. I have satisfied this lust so much till now. Satisfied my desire, so enjoy so much, but they have never given me retirement from their service. They are always engaged me in their service. They are never satisfied. So living entity, when he understands, he gets baffled by prolonged lustful activities. He gets done with it now. बहुत हो गया अभी. When he thinks like this, then again he begins to inquire into about his real spiritual position. Athato brahma jidnyasa. So when he is done with material enjoyment, then he starts doing athato brahma jidnyasa. He starts inquiring into his own eternal spiritual nature again. And then he comes to know that janmadyasya yataha, Supreme Lord is the source of everything. So Supreme Lord is the source of lust also. So instead of trying to be lusty, better to become loving to the Supreme Lord. So when that lust is again transformed into Krishna consciousness, then the living entity is again happily situated. He becomes again happily situated. He becomes again very blissful in his life. So that's why Srila Narottam Das Thakur says that Kama Krishna Arpane. So if one, or Ambarish Maharaj also says, Kamam tu dase, natu kama kamya. So kama means basically strong desire for enjoyment. So same strong desire for enjoyment, if it is doubted in Krishna's service, that I want to have, there is a strong desire to give Krishna enjoyment. There is a strong desire to enjoy ourselves. Same thing, if it can be transformed into strong desire to give Krishna enjoyment. That way one can become situated again back into one's original position. So that's why Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is praying, Vishayera priti hoka cheya che amara sei mata priti hoka चरणे तुम्हारा. He said, मेरा भक्तिनाथ ठाकुर से मेरा जो विषयों की प्रति जो प्रीति है, that lust is there towards Vishaya, sense objects. Oh Lord, please make same attachment, let it be reposed on what? At your lotus feet. So Kama Krishna Karmarpane, the lust can be engaged into Lord's service by desiring Lord's enjoyment, to give Lord's enjoyment. And this is typically the nature of Brajvasis. They have very intense desire to please Krishna, and in this way they can do anything to please Krishna. So then Prabhupada says, then both lust and wrath also can be spiritualized. Krodha, now Narottam Das Thakur says, so lust, Kama Krishna Karmarpane. So lust can be used to please Krishna, to desire very strongly to serve Krishna. Krodha, how the krodh can be engaged? Krodha bhakta dveshi jane. Those who are against devotees, towards them, the krodha can be directed. That's what Narottam Das Thakur says. So we have to take these bona fide statements of Acharyas. So Acharyas have said that Krodha Bhakta Dveshi Jane, one can direct that Krodha towards those who are envious towards devotees. So Prabhupada gives example of Hanuman, who was a great servitor of Ram. So he directed his anger towards whom? Towards Ravan, because Ravan had captured Sita. So he directed his anger towards Ravan and he burned the Lanka. And another example, Prabhupada said, even Arjun. Krishna is also engaging Arjun, inducing Arjun to use his anger towards the unruly party of Kauravas. So in this way, for whom? For the satisfaction of the Lord. So in this way, when the lust and anger, they are employed in the Krishna consciousness, they become our friends. They don't remain our enemies. So yes, in general, this lust and anger are our greatest enemies. But if they are engaged in Krishna consciousness, then they become our friends. They don't remain enemies. So Arjun and Hanuman are glorified for their anger, isn't it? Because of anger, they achieved something tangible for the Lord. So, but they use the anger in the right place, like that. So once upon a time, one devotee asked His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj, how to use anger in Krishna service. So Prabhupada Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, he said that one should become angry on wrong philosophies. That way one should use anger in Krishna's service. There are so many wrong philosophies are being propagated, so one can become angry on that. How there are non-Krishna philosophies are being propagated, so one become angry on that. So that is the way to curb our anger. So lust is more subtle than wrath. Sometimes a person who is lusty, he may get undetected, but an angry person is very easily noticed, isn't it? But the nature of lust is it will not be satisfied, and inevitably it transforms itself into anger, and the lust burns like fire. It is all devouring. How much ever petrol we may put in fire, the fire cannot be extinguished. It will demand more and more and more. How much ever one may supply to lust, the lust will demand more and more and more. So in the Rajaniti, it is said that enemy is controlled with words, gifts, possession, and finally punishment. What is that? Sama, Dama, Bheda, Danda, through which the enemy is dealt with. However, lust is Mahapapma. It is such a mighty enemy. So most of the ordinary methods will fail to control this lust. It will not be able to defeat. So that's why Srila Baladev Devashan says that danda is the only way to deal with lust. The only way to deal with lust is punishment. Lust should be punished by starving it. You will not get. ऐसा punishment अगर देते हैं, then only lust can be dealt with. So lust arises from the mode of passion. So that's why a devotee should be careful about rajoguna. Now this rajoguna is helpful because it can be engaged in the service of the Lord and some accomplishment can be done, but at the same time rajoguna should not be left unregulated or unrestricted. So it should be always regulated through mode of goodness. So instead, otherwise that rajoguna will degrade into tamoguna. So that's why there should be regulator. Just like there is a fire of our gas, the gas fire and the gas should not be kept unregulated. It will create a havoc. So passion may be useful to some degree, but it should be regulator. That's why regulator is that goodness. You have gas as regulator, right? So that regulator, the lust can be regulated, and in this way then it becomes helpful. It is little favorable. It can act in some favorable way for Krishna consciousness. Okay, so please recite 38th verse.
असीम प्रभा प्रभु. Yeah.
Sorry, I cannot read there.
Okay, Avinash Prabhu.
धूमेनाव्रियते वर्हिन्
धूमेनाव्रियते वह्निः
यथा दर्शो मलेन च
दर्शो
मलेन च यथोल्बेनावृतो गर्भः
यथोल्बेनावृतो गर्भस्
तथा तेनेदमावृतम्
तथा तेनेदमावृतम्.
As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust.
Yeah. So 38th verse now Krishna is describing the 3 degrees of covering of this lust. So when Prabhupada says in purport, when lust is compared to smoke, it is understood that the fire of the living spark can be a little perceived. थोड़ा बहुत फायर दिखता है, जहां धुआं है उधर अग्नि है, थोड़ा बहुत अग्नि का परसेप्शन होता है. So Prabhupada says, in other words, when the living entity exhibits his Krishna consciousness slightly, he may be likened to the fire covered by smoke. Although fire is necessary where there is smoke, there is no overt manifestation of fire in the early stage. So in the beginning, there may be some inkling of Krishna consciousness, a kind of Adav Shraddha. So this is the beginning of Krishna consciousness. So it is like fire covered with smoke. Although there is some visibility of fire or some kind of perception of fire, but it is not sufficient fire. It is covered by smoke. Smoke is more, fire is less. So sometimes that's why in the beginning of Krishna consciousness there is more material desires and material activities, less bhakti. That's what is the beginning. Adav Shraddha, the neophyte stage is less bhakti, more material activities. So this stage is like beginning of Krishna consciousness purposes. The dust on mirror refers to cleansing process of mirror of the mind by so many spiritual methods. So Prabhupada is giving little different understanding, and then he comes to another understanding also, which is given as a standard understanding. So now the mirror is covered by dust. Similarly, the mirror of the mind can be cleansed by the process of bhakti, by spiritual methods. And best process is Cheto Darpanam Arjanam, chanting of the holy names. Now the embryo covered with the womb is illustrating helpless position for a child in the womb. The child in the womb is not even visible, not to speak of being visible. It is not even having any ability to even move much. It may move little bit within the stomach of the mother. That's it. So this stage can be compared to that of trees. So we see that lust covers the conditioned soul in different degrees. So living entities like trees or some bacteria, microorganisms or stones, they are so covered that it appears whether it is a question whether they are living entities or not. Are they living or non-living? So Prabhupada says that's why they're almost void of all consciousness, right? In fact, many years scientists could not detect that the trees are living entities. It was Jagdish Chandra Bose who told to the scientists that living trees are living, conscious. Of course, in the Vedas it is written much before only. But the trees are such that it appears that as if they are non-living only. Similarly, some viruses, microorganisms are also like that. So that is considered that. So it is the lust which has covered the living entity to such a degree that it has become almost like unconscious now. Like that, consciousness is almost void. Now next little elevated stage where the lust has lesser covering. So lesser covering is the example of mirror covered with dust. So that is for birds and beasts, because they have some level of consciousness is exhibited in terms of moving, in terms of sometimes of conversing with each other. So that way consciousness is exhibited more, and the smoke covered with fire is lesser covering, further lesser covering, and that is considered to be human form, human form of life. So so the fire, although covered by smoke, still burns to some degrees. Similarly, a human being who is covered by lust slightly can conquer it by bhakti under able guidance. The mirror covered by dust does not reflect images properly, though it is known as the mirror. Similarly, birds and beasts who are covered by lust, they are covered by the lust moderately. The fetus covered by womb cannot even move. Similarly, the consciousness of trees is covered very deeply. So covering is very strong. So Prabhupada says that's why if one carefully handle the smoke in the fire, अभी जो गांव वाले लोग हैं ये सब समझ में आएगा उनको कि how to handle carefully fire which is covered by smoke. Yeah, see, they do some kind of things, to fire जब रहता है बहुत smoke आता है, they do something by which, yeah, they generally put some air through, there is some kind of funkni, yeah, through that funkni they like blow on the root of the fire, and then the fire kindles again, isn't it? So that's what Prabhupada says, by careful handling of the smoke in the fire, fire can be made to ablaze. Similarly, that's why human form of life, the covering is lesser than all other species. All other species are highly covered with lust, but human beings, that covering is lesser. So that's why human form of life is a chance to escape material entanglement. So one can conquer lust by cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance. That is the chance available in human form of life. Yeah. Okay, so 39th verse. Please recite.
Sekhar Prabhu.
आवृतं ज्ञानमेतेन
Avrutam
आवृतं
jnanametena
ज्ञानमेतेन
ज्ञानिनो नित्यवैरिणा
jnanino nityavairina
नित्यवैरिणा
कामरूपेण कौन्तेय
kamarupena
कामरूपेण
kaunteya
कौन्तेय
दुष्पुरेण अनलेन च
dushpurena nalena cha.
दुष्पूरेणानलेन च
Translation. Thus, the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire.
Yes. Nityavairina. Nityavairina means eternal enemy. As long as living entity is trying to be in material consciousness, his eternal enemy is lust. And it is never satisfied. So that's why we quoted this kama dinam katidhana katidha. And it is it burns like fire. So lust is never satisfied. Also, the phrase eternal enemy indicates that lust must be all means killed. Why? Because lust is indeed the ignorance of jiva. It covers the knowledge of jiva. Lust covers the knowledge of jiva, and that's why it is at its eternal enemy. So it must be killed by any means. Nitya vairina, kama rupena. So dushpurena, it is unsatisfied always. It is never satisfied. Yeah. So Prabhupada says that in Manusruti also similar statement is there, that any amount of sense enjoyment you give to lust, it is never extinguished. Just like the fire can never be satisfied by supply of any amount of fuel. So now Prabhupada says, in the material world, the center of all activities is sex. And thus this material world is called Maithuna Agar. So there is one philosopher called Freud. So his philosophy is that sex is the cause of everything. So devotees, when they went to Prabhupada and they said, Prabhupada, Freud says like this, that sex is the cause of everything in this world. Sex is the main central point. So Prabhupada says, yes, what he says is correct. Devotees thought that Prabhupada will defeat his philosophy. But Prabhupada said, yes, that's the correct thing. This material world is called as Maithuna Agar. So sex is the driving force in this material world. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within the bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of Lord are shackled by sex life. This is what Prabhupada says. In the ordinary prison, the criminals are kept within the bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Advancement of material civilization on the basis of sense gratification means increasing the duration of material existence of a living entity. So more there is a attachment to material advancement based on sense gratification, it is simply causing increase of the duration of material stay of the living entities in the material world. That is simply, it is like that. So that's how the living entity is punished more and more, who is disobedient to the laws of the Lord. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness. Yes, so when we enjoy senses, there is some feeling of happiness, isn't it? But actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of sense enjoyer, Prabhupada says. If you are getting happiness while enjoying senses, this is the biggest enemy. Why it is the biggest enemy? Can somebody say?
Because it is entangling us.
Because
It is
it impulses
entangling.
to enjoy more
Okay.
and more.
We will try to do more and more.
Yes, it is addictive also. It is not that once we enjoy, then it is done. It again and again and again and again one wants to continue enjoy, and there is no end to it practically. And that's why Prabhupada says the happiness which one gets while enjoying the senses is the main enemy. It is the biggest this thing. It is the ultimate enemy, Prabhupada says, of the sense enjoyer. So sense enjoyer thinks this happiness to be his friend, but this is his biggest enemy. So this is the biggest problem. Why? Because the sense enjoyer gets addicted to such enjoyment, and then he gets more and more and more and more bound in the shackles of this material existence. So yeah. So now when one fears one's enemy, one must discover where the enemy is situated. Isn't it? So if one knows that where is this, now Krishna is informed that, so what is your enemy, my dear sir? Your enemy is lust. Now one should know where this enemy is. So for that Krishna speaks the next verse. Please recite 40th verse.
Vivek Prabhu. Okay. Chaitanya Prabhu.
Indriyani manobudde
Indriyani
Indriyani
manobuddhi
ashyadhishthanam uchyate
asyadhishthanam
Uchyate
eter vimohayati esha
eter vimohayati esha
jnanam avrityate hinam.
jnanamavritya
Dehinam.
Translation: the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him.
Please read purport.
Purport: the enemy has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul, and therefore Lord Krishna is giving hints of those places, so that one who wants to conquer the enemy may know where he can be found. Mind is the center of all the activities of the senses, and thus, when we hear about sense objects, the mind generally becomes a reservoir of all ideas of sense gratification, and as a result, the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter, and thus with the mind and senses. The spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistake this as true happiness.
Yes. So here Prabhupada is telling, so this lust is in the strategic positions, and we should know, if we want to conquer our enemy, we should know what are the strategic position which the enemy is in. So this lust is in what? In three places: senses, mind, and intelligence. So how everything begins? How the attack of the enemy of lust begins? By hearing. When one hears about the sense objects, then the mind becomes filled with a reservoir of all ideas for sense gratification, and then in this way mind becomes captured by lust, and then mind directs the senses to execute those lusty propensities, and in this way the senses also becomes the repositories of lust. Also it affects the intelligence. Intelligence also become capital of such lustful propensities. Why capital? Because intelligence gives further ideas how to do fulfill lust. That's why it becomes capital. और idea देते कैसे अच्छे से sense gratification कर सकते and in this way the intelligence, who is next neighbor of the soul, he captures the soul. Just imagine a terrorists, how they are attacking. Similarly this lust is a terrorist. How they are attacking. Now intelligence it has attacked, उसका neighbor कौन है? Spirit soul. So in this way, now अगर हमारे neighbor का ही घर पकड़ लिया है तो क्या होगा? That influence will come. So in this way, lusty intelligence, it influences spirit soul to acquire false ego, and that strong identification with the matter comes, and in this way spirit soul becomes addicted for material enjoyment and takes this as his happiness, like that. Hmm. So that's why Prabhupada quote this Yasyatma Buddhi Kronapeti Dhatu verse. How living entity becomes captivated by this false ego and identify himself with the matter. Hmm. So in this way, lust is the greatest enemy. Why? Lust is greatest enemy because it covers the knowledge of the soul of absolute truth. Hmm. So Krishna had spoken before that it is the knowledge which make difference between the working for Krishna and working for fruitive results, isn't it? But lust is such an enemy that it covers that knowledge only. And that's why one becomes entangled in fruitive activities. Hmm. So uh, now Krishna is going to tell next verse how to attack lust, to overcome its power. So that will come in 41st verse. Please recite.
Chandrabhushan Prabhu.
तस्मात् त्वम् इन्द्रियाणि आदौ
Tasmat tvam indriyani adau
नियम्य भारतर्षभ
niyamya bharatarshava
पापानां प्रजहिहेनं
papmanam prajahihenam
ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम्
jnana vijnana nashana.
Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization.
Yes, so Krishna says that from beginning, very beginning, curb this lust. Hmm. So there is one thing which I remembered also. There is one lecture by His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, prison house without walls. So this is where Maharaj also says that although in the generally the living in a person who is in the prison, there are big walls and bars kept, and there are also shackles so that he cannot escape. But this material energy, he has captured the living entity in such a way that although there are no walls, the living entity is captured by this lust in such a way that he doesn't want to even escape. He feels himself happy. So just like sometimes a person who is sammohit, ya sammohita jiva, atmanam trigunatmakam, paropi manute nartham tat tatkrutam chabhipadyate. This is the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So living entity is like a sammohita. Sammohit means sammohan करके उसको पकड़ लिया है अभी माया ने, लस्ट ने. आत्मानम त्रिगुणात्मकम. एंड व्हाट इज द रिजल्ट ऑफ दैट सच सम्मोहन? खुद को त्रिगुणात्मकम समझता है. खुद को क्या समझता है? तीन मोड का प्रोडक्ट समझता है. He thinks himself to be made of these three modes of material nature. Paropi, although he is transcendental. Manute anartham, he gets entangled to anarthas. So that's why Krishna is saying from the very beginning, curb this lust by regulating the senses. Yeah, why? Because this lust destroys the urge for self-realization and knowledge of the self. So even though somebody may be knowledgeable, still the lust is his enemy. Why? Because it covers the knowledge and it destroys even the desire to perform spiritual life. This is the effect of lust. एक भक्ति करने का इच्छा ही चला जाता है because of this getting covered over by the lust. And he says, Krishna says that it is ज्ञान विज्ञान नाशनम. ज्ञान और विज्ञान दोनों का नाश कर डालता है. What is that ज्ञान? ज्ञान is the knowledge of spirit soul different from body, and Vijnana means knowledge of the soul's constitutional position as servant of Supreme Lord. This is Jnana and Vijnana. Jnana is knowledge of soul. Vijnana is the knowledge of relationship with Supreme Lord. But this lust, it destroys both Jnana and Vijnana. And that's how the propensity to serve Lord gets destroyed. That's why he says from the very beginning of life, one should learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. So there are two meanings of beginning, from the very beginning. One meaning of from the very beginning is Prabhupada says from the beginning of one's life. हमारे जीवन के पहले से ही what one should do, one should learn Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. So that's why Prabhupada says, if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the very beginning, that natural love of God cannot deteriorate into lust. When the love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to normal condition. So this is our experience also, right? So that's why in the childhood, the sanskaras of bhakti should be given. More the sanskaras of bhakti are given, the more one will be saved from lust. And in this way, it will not degrade into uh, further entanglement. But if one degrades, then it is difficult to come to the normal situation. So now one may say, अभी क्या करें, हमारा हो गया, we did not get sanskaras of bhakti from in our childhood, then what to do? Prabhupada says, nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regulative principles of devotional service. Hari Bol. So there is a hope for us. So although we may not have got in childhood, in the beginning of our life, but better late than never, isn't it? It is saying, देर से आए पर दुरुस्त आए. So even though one may be late beginner, still one can become lover of God by following the regulative principles of devotional service. So from any stage of life, from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin the regulating senses in Krishna consciousness, devotional service of the Lord, and in this way turn lust into love of Godhead. So whenever one understands the urgency of Krishna consciousness, one can begin regulating the senses. So this is another meaning of from very beginning. Why? Because out of the senses, mind and intelligence, the senses are grossest. Being senses, being grossest, they are easier to control. So from beginning means begin with senses. पहले senses से try करो. Therefore, Krishna is recommending that we should begin to bring lust under control by regulating the senses. First of all, regulate the senses. And how that is done? That is done through वैधि साधना भक्ति. जो हमारे वैधि साधना भक्ति प्रोसेस दिया है, सुबह उठो, 4 रेगुलेटरी प्रिंसिपल्स फॉलो करो, क्लीनलीनेस स्टैंडर्ड्स फॉलो करो, ये करो वो करो, दिस डू नॉट डू दिस. By these regulative principles of Vaidhi Bhakti, one's senses are regulated because they are restricted from sense enjoyment. And in this way, while controlling our senses, one can begin conquering over this lust, enemy name lust. At the same time, while we are controlling our senses, we should not neglect our intelligence. Why? Because intelligence is like a guard who is a next door neighbor of the soul. And actually, it is the business of intelligence to save ourselves from Maya. But if this security guard of our soul has been captured by the enemy called lust, then the situation is very, very dangerous. अगर security guard को ही फूस दिया गया, अगर security guard को ही अपने वश में लाया गया, तो फिर क्या होगा? It will be, just imagine a bodyguard is only bribed. That's what happened with one Prime Minister of India, right? Her bodyguard only shooted her down. So if the bodyguard is bribed by the enemy, then it is very dangerous situation. So if the intelligence becomes materially contaminated, and such a intelligence acts in the service of enemy, then such intelligence becomes very cause of danger. So that's why such intelligence should not be trusted upon. So what one should do? One should get an additional protection. This bodyguard is now, ये गया, ये enemy के पास चला गया है, he has been captured by enemy. Which bodyguard? इंटेलिजेंस. जो हमारे सोल को गार्ड करने वाला था, ये बॉडीगार्ड एनिमी ने कैप्चर कर लिया है, लस्ट ने कैप्चर कर लिया है. अभी इसके ऊपर भरोसा मत रखो. डोंट. सो व्हाट डू यू डू? गेट अनदर सिक्योरिटी फॉर वन सेल्फ. व्हाट इज दैट सिक्योरिटी? गुरु साधु शास्त्र. उससे बुद्धि डिराइव करो एंड गिराइव सिक्योरिटी फ्रॉम दैट. So don't believe on your intelligence, believe on Guru Sadhu Shastra. That's what His Grace Bhurijan Prabhu is saying. So anyways, I was thinking that I'll complete this chapter today, but it could not be completed. So tomorrow we will complete and begin the 4th chapter. So 40 Second verse there is some discussion. 43rd verse is more or less like a summary. So it will get over quickly. And tomorrow onwards we'll begin with 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Although I am speaking this, but also I am also myself struggling to overcome this lust, anger and all these things. So it is only for my own purification I am speaking. I am not above lust and anger. I am also captured by the enemy of lust, lust and anger and all these anarthas. So I am trying, and we all can try that way. Okay, so there are some questions in this thing. So I can take some questions now. How it works? From our action, modes are detected, or we should act based on the modes we are primarily in. Both are true. Our actions also are indicative of what modes we are in. But it is not that we should, it is very glorious to remain within these modes. Like, once uh, once one person asked Radheshyam Prabhu, it is written that in Kali Yuga brahmacharis will be unclean. It is written that in Kali Yuga brahmacharis will be unclean. So he said, so if we remain unclean, what is the problem? Radheshyam Prabhu said, we are not supposed to prove the statements of, this thing. It is a problem. It's a fact, but it's a problem. That problem, although that may be a fact, but that fact is a problem. One should try to overcome that problem. Not that we are saying that, so I am unclean brahmachari, so it's very glorious. It's nothing glorious about it. The same way our modes indicate, our actions indicate our modes. That is very fine. But also one should try to elevate oneself from the modes. Somebody may say, I am in mode of ignorance, Prabhu, so I'll keep on sleeping. What to do? I am in mode of ignorance. I am acting according to my modes. Is it very glorious to be keep on sleeping all day and night in the ignorance? No. So, okay. Now that's why what one should do, one may have to act according to modes, but one should try to gradually elevate, regulate and elevate. So now somebody is in mode of ignorance, he has a great tendency to sleep. He wants to sleep unlimitedly. So what he should do, he may restrain some amount of sleeping at least. Suppose he is sleeping 12 hours. He says, say, what to do? I'm in mode of ignorance. I want to sleep 12 hours. Okay, you reduce from 12 hours to 11 and a half hours first and steadily reduce it, steadily make it 11 and a half hours. Then once you are situated on 11 and a half hours, then go to 11 hours, then go to 10 and a half hours. In this way, gradually regulate. But that regulation is not possible unless until one takes some program of goodness also. So take bath 2-3 times in a day, apply a nice cow product soap, or take sattvic ahar. So in this way, the sleep will be controlled also. Avoid tamasic ahar, especially meat eating and all that. So in this way, the sleep will be also controlled, and in this way one will be able to come gradually out of mode of ignorance, like that. Okay. Yeah, so knowledge is required. Without knowledge it is not possible. If one doesn't know, only I'm in mode of ignorance, then that's why after coming in bhakti, at least we can understand, oh, ye mode hai. Pehle to modes pata hi nahi tha. Isn't it? After bhakti, at least we get this knowledge that these 3 modes of material nature are there. So I should, these are the risky sides of my life and these are the positive strengths of my life. So when we are aware of our strengths and weaknesses, then we can help to strengthen our strengths, to focus on our strengths, and also to reduce weaknesses. So knowledge is very important. He is asking that, sometimes we know that this is our problem, but urgency doesn't come. Yeah, so there are 2 ways of getting urgency. One is through proper association and through proper contemplation. That's why there should be mananam, contemplation on what we have heard. Without contemplation, that urgency will not come. Another way, that material nature will itself, by her course of action, will put us into urgency. But that is a painful way. All right. Now another question is, if instructions are given to do particular service by guru or authority, then one must do that and not consider whether that service will align with his mode, or is it right? Is this example above one of the exception where one can take others duty thought on transcendental to mode of instructions? So one thing is that whether there is a scope for if a guru gives instruction, whether we consider whether it is according to my modes or not, should we not consider it? Generally, if guru gives us instruction, then one should follow it as it is, because guru knows. But at the same time, for others, generally most of us are not directly dealing with guru. So for other devotees, we can have a scope of dialogue. So if you hear yesterday's Chaitanya Charan Prabhu's Srimad Bhagavatam class, he spoke this particular point essentially, that one can have a discussion. In the beginning, try to follow first of all, rather than thinking that this is my nature, because as it was told previously also by His Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj, and yesterday His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu also repeated the same concept, that we cannot come to know our swabhav very easily. Even to understand our varnashrama swabhav, it's not that easy. It requires some amount of goodness. So that's why till that time, one can do those things which one likes. At the same time, also one should do those things which one may not like, but they are instructed by us, instructed to us by our superior authorities. And when slowly one is confirmed of one's swabhav, then one can consult with them, and eventually they will also, even authorities also want us to be engaged in our services in a happy way, in Krishna consciousness in a happy way. So we can consult and dialogue, have with our counselor or our authorities. And by having that healthy dialogue, one can get a particular type of engagement for us, by which we'll be happily engaged also. At the same time, we will get purified also of our propensity to lord it over material nature. So both should happen, you know. So that's why, because detecting our swabhav is also not such a easy thing. It requires some amount of jnana and some amount of goodness. But unless until one is fully transcendental, what if somebody is not transcendental, still acts very faithfully according to the direction of guru? He will not be at loss, because guru's direction will protect him. The example is of Priyavrat Maharaj. He acted as per the direction of Brahmaji, and that's why he was protected from Maya. Is it not conflict with 2.12 verse? Yeah, I understand what you are speaking about. Living entities are expansions of Krishna, right? That's what we discussed. They are not expansions of Krishna in terms of a physical expansion in the material world. Just like a child, father gives birth to a child. Sometimes when we say, people say, father never gives birth to a child, mother gives birth to a child. Especially Mataji is the object on this. Yeah, of course, both father and mother give birth to child. It's not that Mataji is the only person who gives birth to child. Without father, Mataji cannot give birth to the child. So father also gives birth to child. It is not only a woman gives birth to child. Father is also giving birth. So it is not that way. That there was no living entity, and then Krishna was alone. And then what happened? Suddenly living entities started popping out of his body. No, living entities are eternally existing always. But in material world, Krishna is, before the creation of this material world, Krishna is alone, right? Na Brahma, na Shiva, eko Narayano asit, na Brahma, na Shiva, na Indra, nobody was there. Only Supreme Lord Vishnu was there. And then he says, eko Bahushama, now I will expand myself into various living entities. Otherwise, it is not that कृष्णा के बॉडी से अलग अलग लिविंग एंटिटीज आ रहे हैं ऐसा नहीं होता है. The living entities are eternally present. Krishna is also eternally present. So it is more in material world. Eko Bahushyamah. When one is afflicted by lusty desires due to contact with sense objects, what to do? That they point, what is at that very point of time, to save ourselves from indulging? Yeah, it's a very important question. He's asking, when one is afflicted by lusty desires due to contact with sense objects, what to do at that very point to save ourselves from indulging? Yeah, so that's why one should immediately take up some positive activity. That will help one. Also, never remain alone. Immediately run to association, because usually in association will be protected. So one thing is, don't remain alone. Another thing is, immediately take up some other activity to divert our mind from that particular lusty activity, as you are saying. to divert by engaging in some other activities, immediately take up some jhadu and start brooming, or do some other services by which that lusty thoughts will go away. They will be diverted towards some other positive thoughts. So and of course one can offer prayers to the Lord to save oneself. That is another way. So but these two things to be done with mind and senses practically. One is through divert ourselves to other activities. Another is to run in the association of devotees. Don't remain alone. Or in general, in any association, one sense you can say, even if we are at home, don't remain in our room. Go with parents and family members. Remain with them, because in front of them, along with them, we may be little afraid to do engage into lusty activities, right? So don't remain alone. Basically, that's what is the point. Come in the come within the people. So that time we will not be able to do lusty activities, right? So that way one can say oneself. Okay, all right, bros. So yeah. In the beginning it was under 3 modes, but later on he realized Vishwamitra, he's asking that Vishwamitra Muni did Paro Dharma, so it was under 3 modes. Yeah, in the beginning it was like that. He was a Kaushik Raja, so he saw the power of Brahmana, who Vasishtha. So he thought I will also become Brahmana. So that's why it was very difficult. In the beginning, he fell prey to all 6: lust, anger, greed, envy, illusion, pride. All 6. He had Leela with all 6 anarthas. And then, but then because his desire was very strong and he also paid the price also. So eventually he realized and he became humbled also. Then he took shelter of Lord Narayan and he became transcendental, and that's how he took the position of Brahmarshi. So his beginning attempt was under 3 modes, and that's why he had to face lot of troubles. He could not control himself at various times, because of not having that Brahmanical nature. But over the period of time, because he had a strong desire, and he also got that realization that my own strength, I cannot change my nature so easily. But he took shelter of Lord Narayan, and Lord Narayan fulfilled him. Okay, he became humbled, and he was humble, so Lord Narayan also. And in this way, he became a great sage. That's why he's amongst the Saptarshis now. He's a very, very great sage. In fact, so much so that he became spiritual master of Lord Ram, also one of the spiritual masters of Ram. So, how? Because of he ultimately took shelter of Lord, like that. That's the case of Vishwamitra.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
1 minute. One question is already being asked. Then I'll take your question.
Okay.
Prescribed duties. Yeah, this question was asked before also. As I said, it's a very complicated answer for it. So I would not like to exactly answer this question because, it can be controversial subject matter for discussion. He's asking whether, our current duty which we are doing, it may not be according to Varnashrama. If we do it, whether it will lead to purification. Generally, what is meaning of prescribed duty within this Bhagavad Gita is prescribed duty means prescribed duty according to Varna Ashrama system. That is what is called as prescribed duty. So this is what is the Shastri statement. And you all understand whatever you want to understand through it. I don't want to go further into it. Okay, Shantanu Prabhu, you are saying something.
Prabhuji, example of Dronacharya also comes, right? He was a Brahmana, but
Yeah.
he also fought. So how do we consider he was under 3 modes or not? And um,
It is said that under emergency situations, a Brahmana may take the work of either Kshatriya or Vaishya, but never of Shudra. So because it was an emergency situation for Drona, he was practically starving like anything. So he had to take up this occupation of Kshatriya.
okay,
In
like
general,
teaching the
Brahmana should not.
Pandavas. Like
Yeah.
teaching the Pandavas archery and all those things.
Yes, correct.
Okay, okay.
That was under emergency situation.
Right.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
One minute. One question is already being asked, and I'll take your question. Namdev Anand Prabhu. Yeah, because it covers our knowledge. Lust cover. He's asking that how the lust desire destroys the desire to practice Krishna consciousness, because lust covers our knowledge. And when there is no knowledge, then one cannot discriminate between what is right and what is wrong. And generally, the desires come from right knowledge. Right desires come from right knowledge. Right association, right knowledge, the right desires are produced. That's why when we study Bhagavatam and study these great characters like Amrish Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, Narad Muni, Prahlad Maharaj, Vrindavanvasis, then our desires are also to serve Krishna become more and more ignited. But if one associates, if one associates with lust, then one is one's knowledge is covered, and then what happens is that one's more focus is how can I enjoy myself, and more one is self-centered, body-centered, or material enjoyment centered. There is no question of thinking otherwise. So that's how there is a person doesn't feel like doing any this thing. It is like lighting a fire and putting water into it. Fire will not burn. So that way, so it basically it puts water on that fire of bhakti one has. It extinguishes that fire. Why? Because the knowledge is covered, and because there is so much obsession for that personal sense gratification that one doesn't consider. In fact, the more and more one becomes lust covered by lust, more and more one becomes self-centered. Even he cannot even think about others, even on material terms also. He will think about himself only. That's why we see animals are very, very self-centered. And further, at least, human beings have more community feelings and they want to do something for at least somebody else. Animals are further more self-centered. Still, they have some type of community feeling. The trees and microbes are much more self-centered, right? Why? Because they're extremely lusty. So it's more and more, I should get all enjoyment. That's it. Others, आप नरक में जाओ, मुझे कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. Hell with you. I want to enjoy myself. So where is a sir? In order to serve Krishna, one should understand that I am servant of Krishna. I want to, I am not this body. ये सब knowledge रहना चाहिए, तो ही one can serve Krishna. Isn't it? So that way. The lust means desire to enjoy in this material world. Any material desire to enjoy is there. That is called lust in general. So that basically grossly it manifests through sex desire. But in general, any desire to enjoy, subtly it manifests through puja la pratishtha also. So all these things make one bound. So it applies to all this. That makes a living entity bound in this world. Yeah, that's what, that's what. It's not only sex desire. It is all desire to भौतिक जगत में भोग करने की प्रवृत्ति. That is called lust, काम. Like that. Yes, Namdev Anand Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I'm having three questions. Actually, according to Varnashram Dharma, means we had different duties according to different Varna. But nowadays we get different education only, and we do our profession differently. So it may be not according to Varna. And in Shastra it is mentioned Kaliyuga Kalo Shudra Sambhava, means all are mostly Shudra. And how to understand it? And in ISKCON we have Brahman Diksha also, Prabhuji. So means if someone is doing duties or Varna of not of Brahmana, then how we get Brahman Diksha?
Yeah. So first of all, there is guna and karma vibhagashah. Krishna has spoken, right? So now, karma wise, uh, So Kalau Shudra Sambhavat is one thing, but again it is also, as I said, that it is not that one should remain on that level. One should try to uplift oneself to the higher level. It is not glorious to just remain in the lower level. One should uplift oneself. Now, as far as professions are concerned, they may not be strictly according to Varnashrama in Kali Yuga. So for that, either one should try to establish Varnashrama system, and those who can contribute to it and can identify their Varnashrama and act according to that, that is best. That is the best way. If one can act now, at least after coming Krishna consciousness, one identifies what is his Varna and tries to act in that manner. That is the best thing. But in case one doesn't have that opportunity because of outside circumstances are like that. For example, somebody is a Vaishya by nature. So then, but it is not so easy to set up a business also. So that's why whatever occupation one may take, because these things are little complicated in Kali Yuga, whatever occupation one may take, irrespective of that, the process of Krishna consciousness, the good news is as process of Krishna consciousness does not depend on our material propensities. Irrespective of whatever you are doing, if one practices Krishna consciousness, even if one is engaged not as per one nature, still by process of Krishna consciousness, one will be elevated to the highest standards, highest platform. So process of bhakti is very powerful, like that. Now, as far as Brahman Diksha is concerned, so a devotee may be acting not as a Brahmana by his karma, but he may have qualities of a Brahmana, and that's why he is qualified for Brahman Diksha. A devotee may act like a Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra through his occupation. That may be there because in the present situation, modern times, it is not that easy to take up according to Varnashrama a particular occupation because there are complications to it. One can do it slowly, gradually, one can do it over the period of time. But nevertheless, whatever may be one's occupation, if one takes to the qualities of Brahmana, develops the qualities of Brahmana by doing japa, by following four regulative principle, by following cleanliness standards, by worshipping the Supreme Lord, engaging in Sankirtan, engaging in various services of the Lord, so that is one has got the qualities of Brahmana, although may not be the occupation of Brahmana, and that's why he is qualified to receive Brahman Diksha. Is that all right? Yes, Akash.
Lust is actually intense desire of soul to enjoy. And yet in the shloka, the sensor, the mind is there. Soul mentioning.
Soul is not the repository of lust. Yeah. Soul under false ego, he desires to enjoy something. That's why Prabhupada told the mechanism. There are senses. Mind is, first of all, one hears about sense objects. So mind becomes repository of all the desires for sense gratification. And mind has, his subordinates as senses. So, and mind and senses, they become one team and they become source of lust. Also, mind occupies, also influences the intelligence which is weak, is occupied by mind. And in this way, mind also influence the intelligence to take up lust, to become the lust party. And that's how intelligence, being the security guard of the soul or next door neighbor of the intelligence also makes soul acquire false ego. So soul gets covered. So his desires are not, which are being exhibited in a conditioned state, are not his original desires. These desires are coming through the filter of false ego. That's why soul is not the place of lust. It is the covering the soul acquires of false ego, through which soul acts as if there is a lusty desire. Just like if we wear a glass which is made up of green color, then everything looks green. It's not that it is originally green. Neither our eyes are big and green, but it's the covering of the eyes, which is our chashma, that goggle has become green. Goggle is green, and through that, when we see everything, it becomes green. it looks like everything is green, green, green around. Originally, it is not green. Same way, soul doesn't have original desire to enjoy in this material world. There is no such desire. But soul's desire, when they are filtered through false ego, they come through false ego, then those they exhibit in the form of desire to enjoy in this world. Yeah, originally soul only has put. No, there were there. Spiritual. There is spiritual intelligence. There is spiritual ego. There is spiritual mind. It is not that there is no mind in the spiritual world. There is mind. There is ego. There is intelligence. But at a particular point of time, there is an inkling that I want to enjoy independent of the Lord. And then false ego covering comes. Like that. In order to satisfy that desire. These are not original desires of soul. So these are coming through false ego. But soul originally desired that I want to enjoy independent of Krishna. So there is a covering. So if you go in second or third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Brahmaji, how he covers Tamishra, Andha Tamishra, various levels of ignorance, various levels of modes are used to cover the living entity as per his desire. It's not only one covering. There are so many different types of coverings are mentioned in Bhagavatam. There are 5 types of ignorance which cover. So ऐसा नहीं कि एक covering से काम हो जाता है. बहुत सारे coverings है consciousness के ऊपर. And then now it's like soul is perceiving. Just like अगर हम bulb को लाल color का paper लगा दे तो वो light जो आएगा वो लाल color का light आता है. Isn't it? So same way the soul has now been covered by false ego. Now all his desires are appear through as if they are through false ego only. So but by process of bhakti what it comes that वो लाल color का कागज को निकाल देते. Slowly it is uncovering. Then the original light of soul comes. Original desire of the soul is to serve Krishna only. But there is some inkling comes that I want to try to enjoy independent of Krishna. But originally soul is not desiring that I want to, I want to eat non-veg or something. There is no such desire of the soul. But due to false ego, the soul, these desires come through false ego, and that's why it appears like that.
So, what we are saying is mind.
All three: mind, intelligence, senses. So begin with senses first, Krishna says. That's why he's telling. Because senses are gross, they are more easy to control than mind. And directly if you think that mind ko hi direct karte, but we cannot directly engage the mind. So pehle senses se chalu karo, Krishna says.
Soul is still desiring. So, soul will go back.
No, if they get purified, then that means what? The soul has realized that I have committed a big mistake. That's what it means. If the mind, intelligence, and senses are purified, if you say, that means that the spirit soul has realized that I committed a big mistake by desiring something to enjoy independent of the Lord. So he's no more the resident of material world. He'll go to spiritual world. Sleep. Because the soul, if he desires to enjoy independent of the Lord, then all these things come in picture: anarthas, contaminations, coverings. If there is no such desire only, that soul is not at all desiring to serve independent of Krishna, then there is no question of all these things. First bottom, it's a in due course of time. See, as you said, basically the soul is activating all these things. No? So if his, if mind and intelligence and senses are purified, means what? Purified means what? ऐसा नहीं कि कुछ तो external cleansing process हो रहा है. Purified means there is a desire of the soul is also getting purified through it. And in this way, there is no more desire to enjoy independent of the Lord. And that's how the soul goes to spiritual world. वो कनेक्शन है ना बाबू. इट्स नॉट दैट ये एक चीज है दो दूसरा चीज ऐसा नहीं है. देयर इज अ कनेक्शन बिटवीन दिस टू. So if this is getting purified, means what? Automatically that means the soul's pure desires are wrong desire also getting purified. Na? Without that, how this will happen? If one is engaging in Krishna consciousness, this is indication that I want to purify my desire to enjoy independent of the Lord. That itself is an indication, and more that desire becomes intense and intense and intense. Through that desire only these things are getting purified. And so these things are getting purified, so that desire becomes more and more intense through process of bhakti and through good association. Then So then soul becomes completely purified, then all the contaminations are over. Yeah, the desires are completely purified. So all contaminations are over. Like that. Deha, Deha Smriti Nahi Jar, he says, Sansara Kotha Tar, जिसके पास देह स्मृति नहीं है तो उसको संसार क्या है? One who doesn't identify only with this body, where is the sansar for him? Sansar doesn't exist only for him. Like that. Yeah. Soul से चालू हो रहा है means what, again that's what I am saying. It is not that these are two different living entities. It's the same only. Soul is being covered. So ultimately all desire, source of all desires is soul only, right? So when we are engaging ourselves in Krishna's service, it is, the soul is getting recovered from the disease of his desire to enjoy independence. So that's how he directs his senses that now you engage in service of the Lord, mind. So it is like, वो लाल कवर को जो बल्ब के ऊपर लाल कवरिंग है उसको तो धीरे धीरे निकाल रहे and then the but at current stage what is there, वो पूरा पूरा जो पेपर है जो बल्ब को कवर किया हुआ है वो पूरा नहीं निकाला है अभी तक, इसलिए वो अभी तक थोड़ा लाल प्रकाश भी आ रहा है, थोड़ा नॉर्मल प्रकाश भी आ रहा है. When पूरा निकाल दिया जाएगा, then it will be, only light. There is no red light. Yeah. So there is some uncovering. That's why he says fire covered by smoke. Because there is some fire is there. ऐसा नहीं कि there is zero fire. If there is zero fire, there cannot be smoke also. So smoke is there, so there is some fire, but maybe smoke is more, fire is less. Eventually, what will happen? If he properly handles fire, that's why Prabhupada says, if one properly handles fire, fire will be more, smoke will reduce, and there won't be any smoke eventually. All right. Yeah. So, should we stop here?
Yes, Guruji.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Guruji. Hare Krishna.
Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavad ki jai.
Jai.